Hi. I said last time we were going to come back and we're going to start looking at applying a lot of the concepts that we've been studying, the theoretical concepts, to flamenco. This is where the rubber is going to start meeting the road. We haven't done a lot of that up to now because we had to get a lot of these concepts up to our under our finger, in our heads and in our minds. But we're gonna start doing that now. So saddle up. Here we go. Let's look at an Andalucian cadence. In the site, Jason spent a long time going through this in different keys. Wonderful layout. Let's just take the basic one in A. It was D minor to C to B flat to A. A usually has the added flat 9 on there. Okay, it can be played there, it can be played here, it can be played wherever you can find it. Okay, now I said sometimes it's going to be a little random, so let's inject a little randomness into it right now. What is this flat 9 business? Let's get this stuff out of the way. Now we're going to do it kind of hurriedly in kind of a cursory fashion. Okay, we'll come back and we'll look at it a lot more detail when we get into the modes and that sort of thing. But for right now, let's take a down and dirty look at it. Well, the ninth, it's up in what's called the extended octave. In the lower half, the first octave is where we found our roots, thirds, and sevenths. Now there's an extended octave. You'll hear the words like extended octave, upper structure, these kinds of things. That's where the 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths are found. Now, where'd they get these funny numbers? Well, if you remember, there's 7 tones in the major scale. Let's go back to C. We were really good at stacking thirds. Let's continue with that concept real quickly. We took C, then the major third, perfect fifth, major seventh. Now the next note would be the root. We're going to skip that and go up and stack the next third, which would be D. So that's the natural ninth. Where'd they get the funny number? Well, they ran out of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So in the extended octave, it's a ninth. Now the note corresponds, the natural ninth corresponds to the second in the lower half of the octave. Okay, we're stacking thirds, so from the ninth we'll skip the next one, which is the third, and we'll add the 11th. Okay, the 11th is the same or similar in any event to the fourth in the lower octave. Okay, now if we skip the next one, which would be G or the fifth, we'll come up to A, which would be the 13th. That's the same note, only an octave higher, as the sixth is in the lower half. So the 13th and the 6th, the 11th and the 4th, the 9th and the 2nd. I'm sorry. Now you see where they get that. Okay, extended octave, the second octave up, lower half of the octave, roots, thirds, fifths, and sevenths, upper extended octave, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths. Now, what about this flat 9 business? Well, let's go to our A. If we played natural 9, we'd have this sound, because we know the natural 9th is a whole step above the root. So, flat 9 is just like its name implies. It's very intuitive. You just take the 9th and lower it, or flat it. Now we're starting to sound a little bit more frigid. That's where we get the flat 9 business, okay? Now, back to the Andalusian progression. D minor, C, B flat, A with a flat 9, or A regular, or A 7th. Okay, now, when we play the Andalusian cadence that way, we're moving stepwise. We talked about stepwise progressions, very strong, found all the time, and that's exactly what that's doing. Just like a ball rolling downstairs, just coming right down there. Okay, now it could move the other way as well. Okay, now let's look at the concept we've been talking about approaching chords from a fifth above. In other words, not going to somewhere, but sort of this strange thinking of thinking, well, I want to come from the fifth into where I am. So if we look at the D, for instance, what's its fifth? A. it just so happens when we play the progression and we go from A, we've made a fifth. So that's a very strong harmonic movement right off the bat. No wonder we find it all the time. Let's go down to the second chord, C. Let's use the same concept. I want to get here by coming from a fifth above. Well, a fifth above C is G. So we play G as a dominant seventh and approach C. Let's take the next chord, the B flat. We're on a roll here. Let's just keep going with this idea. Well, let's approach the B flat from its fifth F. Okay, and then finally let's resolve B flat down into the tonic. In this case, A Phrygian. Now look at that, one giant circle of fifths. A to D, D to G, G to C, C to F, C to B flat, maybe a different kind of B flat to resolve. Okay? Now, that shows you how the harmonic advancement of flamenco music through the ages really began with Paco de Lucia. There were hints at it before, but he and his cohorts and those guys of his generation were really the guys who really brought this harmonic sophistication to it, if you will. I don't mean anything negative by that, because the straight stepwise progression is great, and it's still just where it's at for certain ways you want to play it. But certainly the harmonic sophistication has really, or did really change the face of the music. Now, I've been keeping a list of all these funky terms that get thrown around. We're going to solve another one here, and that's secondary dominance. Well, when we say secondary dominance, that's what we've been doing. We've been approaching chords that are sort of the normal chord from a fifth above played as a dominant. It's the secondary dominant, because there can only really be one dominant in the key. So if we start approaching all these chords from dominants above them, then we're really throwing in these dominants. That's why they're called secondary dominants. They generally mean that you're going to approach some chord from its fifth above played as a dominant. Now, we see this all the time. I think the bridge in Triana, I think we went through Triana in the site. So there's a perfect example of an application into a letra of these more advanced harmonic concepts. For those of you who are seeing this on YouTube and don't know anything about this, hey, come to the site, flamenco-lessons.com. Meet El Rubio, Jason, and welcome to the most dynamic site on the web for this kind of stuff. For those of you in it, now you see a little bit about how all of this stuff we've been learning up to now has really been applied and really took the music to a more advanced harmonic level. It's not pejorative. I don't mean that in a good way or a bad way. I just mean, things evolve. They move along, and these harmonic concepts now make the music, I think, a bit more interesting, and they're a lot of fun. We'll come back the next time and we'll look at it in a tonal fashion as these concepts might be applied in Alegría.